The story begins with a disfigured man on the verge of death in the Sahara Desert. His plane was shot down and he suffered terrible burns, losing almost all memory of himself and his past. His body is covered in burns and he is in unbearable pain. However, he is rescued by a Bedouin tribe who discover him and bring him to the Allied camp. He is sent to Italy where he is noticed by a nurse named Hannah. Hannah is a young Canadian nurse who cares for wounded soldiers during World War II. She has suffered a personal tragedy after losing her fiancé and now sees death at every turn. When she and her patient end up in a ruined monastery in Tuscany, she decides to stay with him, feeling that he deserves a peaceful death in peace and quiet. Hannah takes him to the abandoned monastery to care for him in his final days. She creates a small world around him where his suffering can be mitigated by care and attention. The man is a Hungarian cartographer named Laszlo Almasi. Gradually through his memories we learn about his past. The story unfolds in flashbacks that reveal his past, his work, and his tragic love. Almasi was working on a desert mapping expedition in North Africa. His team was led by a British explorer, and together they sought to create accurate maps of uncharted territories. It was during this expedition that Almasi met a woman who turned his life upside down. That woman was Catherine Clifton, wife of another member of the expedition, Geoffrey Clifton. Catherine was a beautiful, intelligent, and lively woman who quickly won Almasi's heart. At first, they were just acquaintances, chatting about cultural and scientific topics. However, a certain chemistry began to emerge between them, which soon turned into passion. Almasi, always reserved and disciplined, could not resist his feelings for Catherine. Their affair was forbidden as Catherine was a married woman, and this added spice to their relationship. Their relationship developed against the backdrop of the magnificent desert landscapes, which emphasized the contrast between the outer world and the inner storms of the characters. The desert with its infinity and mystery became a metaphor for their relationship, where each meeting was like a mirage, elusive but so desirable. They tried to keep their relationship a secret, but gradually their passion became more and more obvious to others. Meanwhile, the expedition continued and Almasi and Catherine were forced to meet in secret. They spent nights together in the desert under the starry sky, talking about a life of love and their dreams. However, their happiness could not last forever. Geoffrey, Catherine's husband, began to suspect that something was going on between his wife and Almasi. This caused tension in their relationship, and Geoffrey decided to act. He decided to destroy both of them by organizing the crash of his plane to kill both himself and Catherine and Almasi. One day Geoffrey took Catherine for a flight in his biplane, saying he wanted to show her one of the ancient temples they had found. In fact, he intended to crash with her, but Catherine managed to survive the crash. Geoffrey was killed and Catherine was left badly wounded. Almasi rushes to her aid but is faced with a difficult choice of either taking her to safety or leaving her behind, knowing that her life is in danger. He decides to leave her in one of the caves, hiding her there and promising to come back for her with help. Almasi goes across the desert in search of help, but faces insurmountable obstacles. He is arrested by British soldiers who believe him to be a spy, and his attempts to rescue Catherine prove futile. He is never able to return to her in time. Back to the present, Hannah continues to care for Almasi, who is no longer able to fight for life. She reads aloud to him, plays the piano, and tries to make his last days less agonizing. They are joined by other characters who also find themselves in this monastery, each with their own story. One of them is Caravaggio, a thief and former spy who is looking for answers and trying to make sense of his past. He believes that Almasi was involved in a betrayal that led to the deaths of many people, including Caravaggio's own torment. Caravaggio tries to find out the truth from Almasi, but he refuses to talk. Caravaggio gradually realizes that Almasi, despite all his mistakes, does not deserve hatred. He sees not an enemy, but a broken man who has suffered more than he can bear. Almasi in turn begins to remember more about his past, his love for Catherine, and how their story ended. Meanwhile, Hannah continues to face her own demons. She realizes that her attachment to Almasi is not just a professional duty, but something more. She sees in him a reflection of her loss, her grief, and her pain. She cares for him not only out of compassion but because he has become something important to her. Hannah finds in this care the meaning of her life, trying to dull the pain of the loss and suffering that the war has brought her. The story reaches its climax when Almasi, realizing that his life is coming to an end, asks Hannah to give him one last chance to remember his past. He tells her how he tried to save Catherine as he carried her letter with him, how every day he felt he had betrayed her by leaving her to die in that cave. His pain of loss and guilt became unbearable, and he lived only to return to her, at least in his thoughts, to redeem himself. The film ends with Hannah realizing that she can no longer help her patient and decides to ease his suffering. She injects him with a lethal dose of morphine so that he can leave without pain and agony. Almasy, already semi-conscious, thanks her and talks about Catherine, remembering their last meeting. His face relaxes and he passes away, finally finding the peace he has longed for. After his death, Hannah leaves the convent, but she is no longer the young woman whom the war had forced to shut herself away. She leaves having found a new meaning in life, realizing that life goes on despite all the loss and suffering. She leaves behind everything that bound her to this place, but does not forget the lessons it taught her. In the final scene, Hannah walks away on the road that leads away from the monastery, symbolizing that she is finally ready to move on, leaving the past behind and starting a new phase of her life.